I just know something bad is going to happen.
Who's ready to pick up a blade and go into the mystical society of Earth's next generation of heroes, known as Classroom for Heroes, from the studio that later gave us Wistoria, Wand and Sword, and Princess Principal. We all had to get our start somewhere, so sit back as we regale you a tale from start to finish. The main cast being Blade, Ernest, and Sophie, as we meet the rest of their classmates and their day-to-day life at the campus to become heroes. With that done, let's get into the first episode. The Demon King threatens to destroy the world if the great hero fails to stop him. The Demon King then attacks the hero, and the hero intercepts the attacks with a stone. The hero then says that they should go all out and settle this fight. Once and for all, they both use powerful attacks against each other. The hero uses the Dragon series while the king wields the demon power of annihilation. The fighting goes on for many days and nights, with the hero's hair turning from black to white, and in the end, both of them exhaust themselves and kill each other. The hero can finally rest in peace because the world has been saved. The next scene shows pupils mingling at an academy. A boy dressed differently with separated white and black hair yells enthusiastically because he can now be normal and make new friends. He is very eager, talking animatedly to classmates who appear to be avoiding him. The academy students find him strange and believe he is a transfer student. The boy then notices them and attempts to introduce himself to a number of the students as Blade. The men introduce themselves as Kasim and Clay, while the women introduce themselves as Jessica and Claire. Blade can't believe he's already made 4 pals. He believes he'll be able to create 100 more. They tell him that he'll have to befriend the whole student body. After they tell him this, a girl named Ernest Flaming asks them why they are raising a fuss in the middle of the corridor at a respectable institution like Rosewood Academy. Kasim tells Blade about Ernest Flaming, and he claims that she is the top student at this academy. Everyone refers to her as the Empress, but Blade exits before they can finish and tries to introduce himself to Ernest. She becomes annoyed since she hasn't seen him around here. The students straighten up and Claire tells Lady Ernest that Blade just transferred into this academy. Ernest doesn't buy the comment as the academy admits only those who wish to be heroes who preserve the globe. This is such a late admittance. Blade gleefully declares that he does not concerned about being a hero and is only here to make some friends. Ernest becomes enraged and yells in his face, stating that the school does not require half-hearted dedication. And the situation is tense. Blade then asks her if she can direct him to the headmaster. When Ernest enters the headmaster's office and sees who is seated in the seat, he flushes. Ernest bends down when she sees the person inside. Ernest wonders if he recognizes the man. She begs the king to forgive Blade's rudeness. Ernest tries to get him to bow and drags him back with her. The king adds that he has heard a lot about Ernest from the previous headmaster. Ernest is perplexed after hearing the news, and he declares that he would take over as headmaster immediately. Hearing this, Ernest, it is an honor to be educated by a renowned warrior such as the king. Still flushed, she is unable to convey her excitement in words. The king interrupts the girls talking, instructing Ernest to leave now so that he can speak with Blade privately. Ernest is taken aback, and when she recovers, she becomes enraged and jealous of Blade. The two can clearly hear her expressing her disgust outside the door. Blade is also unhappy since he has been on her bad side. Blade narrows his eyes and asks the king what he's doing here, to which the king responds that he wants Blade to reclaim his hero status. Blade adds that all he wants is to be a regular person, but the king dismisses him, saying that the pupils here are great and will serve him well as rehabilitation training partners. He announces his intention to make big changes as his predecessor was quite permissive. The king says he wants the kids here to be great heroes like him, but Blade points out that there is no need for that because the Demon King has already left. Blade now believes the elderly man has gone insane. The scene shifts to the training grounds, which are filled with pupils of various disciplines. Ernest is upset to see Blade because this is the advanced class, and she questions why Blade is here, to which Blade responds that he took the exam for the poorer classes, but he was told to come here. Ernest then asks if Blade paid his way into this class, to which she responds that this academy is not for half-hearted people like Blade. Her ranting captures the attention of the other students. He declares that he is serious about making 100 friends, and then goes around introducing himself to everyone in the class and inviting them to be friends. With him, Ernest asks Blade to listen to her. The boy returns, places his hand on her, and says he's listening. This act of contact makes her blush, and she grabs her sword. The intensity of her attack causes him to jump, and she is surprised that he is uninjured. A female then approaches and informs everyone that the instructor has requested that everyone assemble. Blade then presents himself to the girl, but she looks at him blankly, so Blade introduces himself again. After Ernest speaks with the girl, she identifies herself as Sophie, which surprises him. Sophie does not speak very much. When the instructor approaches to begin calling, Ernest stares at him as if he is conducting a test of the transfer student's abilities. The teacher is hesitant to give her permission, but he sees her tenacity and backs down. Ernest then requests Blade to Kana through an enchantment of metal armor. She explains that everyone in their class is capable of doing so, and if he is unable to do so, he must accept his failure to enter the academy. Blade then inquires as to how much higher the class is than the rest. Ernest says 2, but quickly alters her response to 3 because she is humiliated. Blade takes a sword and adopts his sword posture, which others recognize as one from the Dragon series. Blade then destroys the armor with the Dragon Eater, destroying a portion of the school in the process. Ernest, being too near, mitigates some of the criticism. The attack shatters the sword, leaving everyone on the ground except a barely faced Sophie and a shredded Ernest who covers herself. The girl, not happy, then asks Blade who he really is. Blade spins around in desperation, attempting to argue that he is just an ordinary person. The scene then changes to everyone having lunch in the cafeteria, where Blade sits with Ernest. He then invites the friends he made earlier to accompany him, but they decline out of fear. Blade asks what has gotten into them, and Ernest, who is used to this treatment, says it's because of her. Blade then wonders whether she is being bullied. Ernest rejects this, claiming that everyone is simply terrified of her. Blade asks why, then eats his food and thinks it's delicious. Ernest is ashamed as she apologizes to him for eliciting entry, since she is unable to get over it. Blade informs her that he does not recall that. Ernest mentions that this has been bugging her for a while, and Blade says she should forget about it because he doesn't remember it anyway. Blade then praises Ernest for all of his support since he arrived. The girl, who is blushing, is bewildered. The boy says he didn't think he'd be able to make any friends here, but now he has Ernest as a friend. Ernest is astonished, not understanding what he is saying. Blade, unconcerned, points to the girl and addresses her as a friend. Ernest gradually warms up as she does not mind being her buddy. The other students whispered at their tables, hearing the interaction, saying how simple it was. The scene then switches to Ernest in her room, unaware that something as simple as eating together might constitute friendship. The girl rolls around on her bed, happy as if she'd made her first friend. Ernest Blade then begins acting up, and she recalls the first time she saw the sword and called out to her. At the time, it ordered her to give in to its bloodlust, to burn, slice, and kill. When she touched it, her hair changed color and she lost control. Back in the present, Ernest grabs the sword tightly, claiming that she is the leader of the Flaming family and will not succumb to the likes of this Blade. The next day, Ernest engages in a pretend battle with Leonard, who easily avoids her strikes. She encourages him to take this fight seriously, but Leonard says he'd rather not use his lance against a lady. Despite this, he charges a magic-based drill attack, and when he goes for it, Ernest undercanats his blow and easily wins. She is ready to strike him with a fatal blow when she suddenly stops. The other pupils comment on the girl's recent violent behavior. Ernest demands to fight again, this time against Sophie. Sophie warns the girl to back down, but she refuses, and they fight. Sophie eventually accepts her setback without emotion. Ernest then demands a fight with Blade, claiming that his skills should be adequate to match hers. As she tries to reassure him that she is fine, she cries, recalling her history, and collapses. Fortunately, Blade quickly captures her. The scene then turns to Ernest in the infirmary, where Blade casually talks to the doctor, a former buddy. The doctor says there is nothing she can do for her. She can heal ailments and injuries, but spells and canarses are not her area of competence. Ernest awakens at that point and wonders if she has done anything wrong. Blade claims she didn't, but getting her here was a bit difficult. Ernest becomes scarlet, upset that he's hiring her because she's heavy. She attempts to leave, but the doctor stops her. Ernest ignores her, and Blade suggests that the doctor simply release her because she appears to be in good health. He says he'll keep an eye on her, and the doctor agrees. Ernest is relying on Blade to move, and when she notices other students ahead, she says she will be okay on her own now. Blade replies that she can rely on him because they are friends, and Ernest requests her not to tell anyone about what happened in the infirmary. Blade enters a secret futuristic facility inside Rosewood Academy, believing that he owes the old king for destroying his robots. Using his granted status crystal, he can access the facility's computers to learn more about Ernest's sword, and he discovers that the demon sword's name is Asmodeus. Blade tells Ernest that he wants to speak with her privately after doing some more study and looking into it after class. Ernest wonders if he wants to take their connection further. He suggests knowing the secret behind her sword, and the scene canats to them chatting in private, revealing that her blade has its own will and provides the possessor incredible power, but they do not have complete control over it. He wonders how this happened, and Ernest explains that she unintentionally touched the Canarsid sword when she was 6 years old, and the sword attempted to take over her body. The power surged through her desire for blood and carnage. She claims she has been suppressing those urges ever since, and she can still hear Asmodeus' voice ordering her to slice and burn to this day. Blade explains that she needs to keep things under control. Ernest claims that she understands that she wants the demon sword to recognize her as its owner, but she is unable to do it because the demon would resurrect if she fails to defeat it. Blade says it will be okay, and if the monster comes to life, he will simply chop it down. Ernest is skeptical and calls him insane, but she eventually believes in his abilities and agrees to subdue the demon, and she asks the demon to make a pact with her. Blade expresses his faith in Ernest, and Ernest confronts the demon in her mindscape, asking Asmodeus to submit to her. Asmodeus refuses. They then struggle to establish who gets control of whom, while Blade deals with the disruption their fight makes outside Ernest, then trades blows with the demon, and after a hard fight, she subdues it and Blade welcomes her back in. Sometime later, a new Ernest greets some girls at school, and everyone is pleased with the transformation. Episode 2. Blade is training with his classmates, but they are no match for him as he simply dodges their strikes. Ernest stops to observe the match and moves over to Blade, telling him to draw his sword. He's simply disrespecting his opponents by looking aside. Without responding, Blade remarks that Ernest appears different today. Ernest is pleased he noticed and wonders what is different about her. Leonard nudges him to remark on her looks. Blade considers it carefully before admitting that he does not know Leonard. He then informs Blade that he should notice when a girl changes her hair, to which Ernest responds coldly that she didn't want Blade to notice anyhow. Ernest then asks Blade to keep an eye on Sophie. Blade questions why Sophie is by herself, and Ernest explains that this is how she always is, but she obeys every command given to her. She explains that she has never seen her perform any spontaneous action, but she deliberately gave Blade her identity, which is why she is leaving Sophie with him. Blade then welcomes Sophie, mentioning that Ernest had asked him to witness her training. Sophie wonders if this is a command, and Blade says he's here to help her. Sophie then states that she can only fight with her hands. Blade suggests that he can teach her different fighting techniques. Sophie worries if it's a command, and Blade says it isn't, and he only wants to help her as a friend, so he won't force her to do anything. Sophie says she's not against the notion, but the class ends before Blade can start teaching her. Later that day, Blade teaches Sophie how to utilize the sword. Another day, Sophie is unable to kanat through the charmed armor with the sword, and Blade advises her to think of the blade as an extension of her body, channeling her fighting energy into it, just as she does with her fist. Sophie then practices with this in mind, and by the evening, she has successfully Kanat the magical armor with her sword. Blade suggests that they call it a day, and Sophie wonders if she can defeat Ernest. Blade says how difficult it will be to reach her level. Sophie then tosses the sword back at the Blade, using her hand-to-hand combat abilities to mount it on top of it. Blade asks her what she's doing, and he says he can't move. Sophie mentions that allowing Blade to move would make for a bad mount position. He accepts, and she asks Blade to teach her something else tomorrow. Blade later speaks with the king, who inquires about Blade's school life. Blade informs the king that he has acquired new acquaintances, which pleases him. Blade has been active as a hero since he was 3 years old, and the king comments that he, too, has someone he considers his best friend, and he wonders who Blade's friend is. Blade claims to have made several pals, the most recent being Sophie. He then says that he knew Blade would be interested in her and that she is strong but unfinished. Blade asks what he means, and the king explains that Blade is perplexed, and the king explains that she was part of the Artificial Great Hero Project. He says that a group of people proposed creating an artificial being similar to Blade, and they chose a human who demonstrated potential and used ancient prohibited knowledge to artificially manifest the great hero powers in her. They also replicated the original human to do numerous experiments and alterations. And he claims Sophie's real name is Sophicia Femto, with Femto meaning 12, because she is the 12th federation of the human Sophicia. Blade becomes concerned at hearing this from the king, but the king calms him down because he has already put an end to that organization. Nonetheless, when he took her in and told her she was free, she responded by asking whether this was a command. Blade exits the room after learning that the girl's condition has not changed. He cannot think Sophie was deprived of her natural existence in order to become a great hero. He blamed himself for his existence when he ceased being a hero. To make amends, he plans to restore Sophie's normal life, but he has no idea what that entails. He goes to his old friend, the doctor, and asks the school nurse what normal means. When he arrives, she instructs him to take off his clothes. She's willing to teach him everything he needs to know about the vigor of youth. Hearing this Blade disappear, he asks Leonardo what youth entails. According to Leonardo, the essence of youth is falling in love. Blade then questions Claire and Jessica about love and what they do with it. Jessica teases the other girl, telling her to explain to him. Claire shamefully admits that they go on dates when they're in love. Blade immediately rushes over to frantically ask Ernest what a date is. Ernest has let her guard down and queries why he needs to know right now. Ernest, ashamed, admits that Canellas spend their dates alone, roaming around town and shopping, and she believes that their connection is still not at that level, but Blade then goes. Ernest is astonished and angry. She is not the person he intended to ask. He asks the guard where Sophie is. The guard says, inside. He finds her in the girls' shower room and barges in, asking her to go on a date with him. Sophie inquires whether it is in order, and Blade responds that it is not, but it is necessary to hear this. Sophie smiles and agrees. On the morning of their date, Blade waits for Sophie. Ernest, Claire, and Jessica see him from a distance. Claire mentions that several girls have filed complaints against Blade after he barged into their shower, and Jessica then delivers Claire and Ernest red bean buns, which Ernest enjoys. Claire says she had never idea the Empress Canald makes such a face. Ernest asks them to stop calling her the Empress. She asks them to call her Ernest, and the girls say they can't. And Ernest says they are comrades right now, united by their mission to watch Blade, so he doesn't try any funny business, and she says they are basically friends, to which the girls agree. Sophie arrives and says she doesn't know anything about the date. Blade says she can leave everything to him, and he then describes their entire goal to her. After hearing the rigid timetable, the spying females think it seems more like a military routine than a date. Sophie then informs them that they are already late according to the agenda, and they leave for their date while locking arms. Ernest believes this is inappropriate, while Jessica says it's quite natural to name the girl Anna. The nickname embarrasses the girl, but she approves. Blade and Sophie then take a trip around town and share some ice cream. The girls see them do all these things. Blade and Sophie then stroll down a bridge where they see people feed fish. They remark that they should try feeding the fish as well, and then drop an entire bucket of fish food into the river. The females are observing them from below the river, have difficulty breathing since it is too much for them to swallow. Because there was so much going on at once, the two went to the arcade and broke the punching machine, prompting the females to apologize. While trying it again, they try to finish a Canali's drink together, and Sophie asks Blade to move in closer because she is having difficulty drinking. Blade scoots up too close and is shocked, leaving Sophie wondering what happened. Blade says he's not sure, but for some reason, his heart is racing. They then drink the juice together, and Jessica complains that she is tired of this. Ernest is completely nervous seeing Sophie and Blade so close together, and Jessica then hands Ernest her parfait. Ernest enjoys the parfait, so she keeps eating it. Claire then mentions that Blade and Sophie have departed, and Blade believes they are being followed but forgets about it. Blade observes that they are late according to their schedule, and they then jump over the skyscrapers and perform difficult maneuvers in midair. They repeat the process until they reach their final destination, where Blade remarks that this is a legendary fountain, which Sophie does not understand. She goes on to say that she had a good time today. Blade remarks that this is the result of their friendship, to which Sophie responds that friends shouldn't hide secrets from one another. Blade worries that he may have to disclose his status as a result, but she goes on. She says that if they're going to be friends, she has to tell Blade something that she hasn't told him. Then Sophie reveals to Blade that she is not an ordinary person, but rather a test subject who was designed to be the artificial hero. She claims that she was given these superhuman abilities and that she can change the laws of physics, much like the great hero. It might even have the ability to suspend time and exert gravity. She can only use her powers for 10 seconds at a time, and she is not entirely in control of them. She claims to be the only successful member of the Artificial Hero Project and the 12th clone of a woman by the name of Sophia. Blade goes on to say that he is the great hero and that he also won't hide any secrets from Sophie, then corrects himself, saying that although he was given that name, his powers have since vanished. Did Sophie know this? He asked her. She responds by saying no. Blade then apologizes to Sophie, telling her that he is the reason she was born with these acquired powers, and that being a great hero is something he never asked to be, but they said he could save everyone, so he had no choice but to do it. Sophie says that this must be the reason he felt familiar with her. He says that when he was 3 years old, his abilities began to show. He battled monsters repeatedly, sometimes teetering on the verge of death. As a result, he was unable to save everyone, and when he failed to save someone, people became upset with him. Blade was physically and mentally severely injured by the events. He wonders if his title means anything at all. Sophie canaries over to a sobbing Blade and declares that despite his own decision not to be one, Blade was the great hero. She says that when the king saved her, she set off on a quest to discover who she was, and that it was on this voyage that she saw. She claims that Blade should be proud of the fact that the great hero saved many people in cities. Blade declares that he will no longer let his history as the great hero to trouble him. Sophie says it's fantastic and adds that only the two of them will know Blade's hidden identity as the great hero. As the narrative progresses, Blade is heard gleefully savoring his tonkatsu dinner. Ernest and Canary claim he has food on his face. Sophie looks at him with twinkles in her eyes as she cleans it for him, and Ernest questions what the pair is up to. When Claire and the others go to their table, they address Ernest Anna. Jessica strikes a pose and inquires about Blade's appearance in her new attire, and he reminds her that they are being promoted to the advanced class today. According to Kasim, the promotion is the reason they are now free to dress however they please. When Jessica asks how she looks, Blade responds that she must be chilly in that outfit. Ernest says she has heard the king is bringing a mythical beast to the academy and begs Leonard to stop flirting. The kids feel the cafeteria trembling, and Blade and friends wonder if it's the magical beast. Kasim and Sophie wonder if they will fight it for training. Blade says he wouldn't rule it out, that old fart. After that, the action shifts to the academy's guards battling a mystical creature, which we later learn is a dragon. When Blade arrives, the dragon notices his food. Ernest tries to assist when the dragon tries to attack him, but Sophie stops her. When Blade mentions that the dragon is still young and that he believes it must be hungry, the others find it hard to believe that Blade defeated it with just one punch. Blade then feeds the dragon some canary rice, and the others are still in shock that Blade defeated a dragon with only one blow. According to Blade, this is typical. The pupils disagree and retreat introspectively. He persists, claiming that it wasn't a great or ancient dragon, and that the others don't consider it to be typical. The dragon changes into a young girl when he spins it. The girl leaps at the chance to play with him. Blade says he will locate the young girl's parents later, but he is unsure of where the girl is from. Setting the girl down, she cries out for him to play with her all the time, and he queries the location of the dragon. The young girl wants Blade to play with her, but Blade urges her to wait a moment. Ernest claims that the dragon changed into that little girl, but Blade finds that to be impossible. After the female gives him some attention, Blade asks them once more where the dragon is. Blade believes Sophie when she tells him that the dragon changed into that girl. The dragon girl then says that she has remained silent long enough and invites Blade to play with her. And Ernest then questions why Blade believed Sophie and not her. The scene connects to Blade helping the dragon girl clean up in his room. The girl tells Blade not to be so rough with her horns, as they are sensitive. We then learn that Blade has named the girl Kana, and Kana wonders why he named her Kana. She mentions that the punch Blade threw earlier was something else, and that's what she expects from her parent. Blade explains that it was the name of a loyal knight who was extremely powerful and trustworthy. When Kana says that she can honor her word even if it means losing its life, she brings up the example of a dragon. Blade answers Ernest's request to come inside his room. When Ernest enters the room, Blade feels ashamed to see that she is taking a bath, and Blade questions whether she has learnt anything. Ernest proceeds to explain that magical creatures, such as dragons, are drawn to strength. When a dragon is vanquished, it takes on the form of the defeated entity. This suggests that the desire for strength is an evolutionary instinct, while Blade believes that a dragon that has been vanquished by a human should assume the human form. Since few humans have ever defeated a dragon, Ernest claims that this is very unusual. Blade wonders if Kana was defeated by a human in a previous life. Ernest asks if Kana is the dragon's name, and Kana responds that it is. Ernest then notices that Blade is bathing with Kana, calling him a pervert. The scene then changes to everyone in the cafeteria the following day, with Ernest giving him a death glare. While perched on his knee, Kana begs Blade to feed him. Although she is perfectly capable of feeding herself, Kana claims that food tastes better when fed by her parents. Then, when Claire tries to feed Kana too, Kana furiously tells Claire that weak humans won't feed her. Then Kana informs Blade that since he is her parent, he is the only one who needs to pay attention to her, and she says he ought to let her sit on his lap and give her morning kisses. Ernest asks Blade whether he offers her morning kisses after Blade says yes. After Blade protests that he hasn't done so, Kana says Blade shouldn't spend all of his time staring at the bodies of adult women. After Kana leaves, the girls can't believe Blade was staring at them. Blade tries to deny this, but everyone believes Blade is guilty, including the females. Later, during a lesson, Blade is sitting by himself. The students think he seems like he wants to join in, but Ernest turns to face them coldly and tells them not to worry. After that, Blade notices Kana and asks if she wants to go with him. When Kana approaches him, she says she doesn't need any training, but that it's okay to demonstrate her abilities to her parents. When Kasim and the others eventually approach Blade, they tell him they were instructed to form a group and beg him to teach them the ins and outs of the advanced course. Then, Jessica says she wanted to espionage, and Blade says she should take a Kana from Sophie because she is an expert in that field. When Kana notices that Blade is ignoring her, she becomes depressed. The others then remark that it will just be the four of them. When Blade goes in search of Kana, he discovers that she is not present. We then see Kana wandering the campus and observing some students working out alone. The students notice Kana and ask if she would like to join them, but she declines, saying that they are no match for her. She then runs into Blade and he asks her what she was doing. Kana replies that it was nothing and that she is hungry. Blade continues by saying that they ought to eat canary. Kana tells him that she doesn't like carrots and asks him not to make it too spicy. Next, the scene shifts to Kana sleeping through the night, and Blade is content to see her serene countenance. Then Ernest summons him. They meet at the terrace to chat, and when Blade informs Ernest that dragons are tormented by their parents from birth, and when the infant discovers that something larger than itself exists, it imprints on that thing as its parent. Ernest considers the possibility that this is why Kana has been alone up to this point. Ernest says that Blade can't act like her parents forever. Blade acknowledges this, but says that Kana will be genuinely alone in the world if he doesn't take on the role of her parent. He says that Ernest ought to understand how painful it is to be by herself, and Ernest responds that she's at a loss for words at this point. Ernest goes on to say that she wonders if Sophie is also here for Blade's daughter. Blade then tells Sophie that there is nothing to worry about, and both Sophie and Ernest leave afterwards. That looking at the moon calms her down, and she states that the big one is like a parent and the small one is the child she mentions that she used to look at them all, the time when she was alone in the wastelands. Kana states that dragons are strong creatures and they don't form flocks. She mentions that they live and die alone, and she states that she doesn't need anyone else as long as she has her parents. The scene then changes to Blade talking with the king, and the king states that this is not a daycare center. Blade mentions that they are the only two people who can look after Kana. He wonders where she is. The king then gives Blade a flashback where we see that Kana ran away. After she was pissed off at the king's constant cuddling, Blade thinks that the king is useless as he can't even babysit. Then, Kanat's to him, looking for Kana all over the place. In the end, he finds her in his room and he notices that she is playing with some dolls by spying on her. He finds out that the dolls are the students of the academy. He notices that she is impersonating them really well. He thinks that she is really observant, and he then notices that Kana has a doll for every student in the academy. Seeing this, he finds out how lonely Kana has really been, and he gets depressed thinking that he didn't even notice this. Blade then hits his head on the wall, and Ernest comes there and she tells him to stop. She asks him what happened, and the other students also come there hearing the commotion. Blade tells Ernest that Kana needs friends, but it's not possible for her nature. He mentions that dragons can't acknowledge anyone weaker than them as an equal. And for her to recognize someone as a friend, they would have to defeat her. He states that it doesn't mean anything if he defeats her, as he can't be her friend, and he mentions that there is nothing he can do. Ernest states that Blade should turn to someone else if that's the case, and she tells him to learn to depend on others. She mentions that it's unfair that she relied on him, but he won't do the same, and she states that Blade can ask her and everyone else for help whenever he is in trouble. Blade and Ernest are at the training grounds for the normal students, and Blade states that he has a favor to ask of everyone. He wants them to fight Kana, a dragon, and defeat her. The student states that it won't be easy, and Blade then prostrates himself, and he asks them to become friends with his daughter. Ernest does the same, and the rest of the advanced class also comes there to make the same request, and they ask the students to fight Kana with them. Seeing everyone kneeling to them, the students agree to their request. Kana enters the arena to fight the students. The king is watching the match, and he thinks that this is the kind of hands-on training that he wanted. The assistant wonders if a dragon will acknowledge defeat if it's taken down by such a large group, and the king states that it will, as in the eyes of a dragon, humans are creatures that work collectively. The king then mentions that it's a shame that he won't be able to watch Blade fight, and Blade then tells Kana that he heard that the humans captured her by laying traps. He mentions that this must have been frustrating, and he states that Kana can fight to her heart's content this time. Thank you for watching till the end of the video. There will be a part 2 soon. But until then, here's another video just like it here.